Okay, so in the previous uh, in the previous class, we ended by talking about surface specialization, right? We ended by talking about surface specialization as far as epithelial tissue is concerned. Now let's talk about cell junctions, or let's talk about intercellular junctions. Okay, so basically these are the major epithelial cell junctions that we have. And this slide basically summarizes everything. This slide basically just summarizes um, everything. Okay. So let's start by talking about tight junctions. Okay. So first of all, when we are talking about these cell junctions or these epithelial cell junctions, what we are talking about is we are just talking about specialized structures of the plasma membrane. Okay, specialized structures of the plasma membrane that, number one, attach and anchor cells. Number two, establish apical and basolateral membrane domains by sealing adjacent plasma membranes. Okay, and apart from that, we're talking about specialized structures of the plasma membrane that provide channels for ionic and metabolic coupling. Okay, we are good about that. So when we're talking about cell junctions, these are not just restricted to epithelial cells. Okay, so cell junctions occur, however, in large number when it comes to epithelial cells, in order to resist the physical forces which normally act on the cells. Okay, so we have four main types of these epithelial cell junctions. Okay, number one, let's talk about the tight junction. Okay, let's talk about the tight junction, which is also known as zonular occludens. So this zonular occludens, when we are talking about the major protein, the major transmembrane protein that makes the tight junction, we have the occludins, we have the claudins, and the zonular occludin proteins. Okay, then the cytoskeleton, the cytoskeleton that makes tight junctions is actin filament. Okay, we have actin filament. So tight junctions comprises of actin filaments. Then the major function, um, the major function of this is that it seals adjacent cells to one another, thereby controlling the passage of molecules between those particular cells. Okay, then let's talk about the adherent junction. So the adherent junctions, they are also known as zonular adherens. So the zonular adherens, basically they comprise three major transmembrane link proteins, which include the E-cadherin, you have the catenine, and the complexes. The zonular adherens also contain actin filaments. Okay, so the major functions of these zonular adherens is that they provide points linking the cytoskeletons of the adjacent cells and strengthening and stabilizing near tight junctions. Okay, are we together? All right. So we also have desmosomes. So the desmosomes are also known as macular adherents. So these, they basically contain proteins which belong to the uh, cadherin family. Okay, cadherin family, and they contain, instead of actin filaments, them they contain intermediate filaments. Okay, intermediate filaments, and their major function is to provide points of strong intermediate filament coupling between adjacent cells and strengthening the tissues. Then lastly but not the least, we have what we call hemidesmosomes. So these hemidesmosomes, they are made up of one link a transmembrane protein, which is known as integrin. Okay, known as integrins. Then they comprise of intermediate filaments as well. Then the major function is that it anchors the cytoskeleton to the basal lamina. We are together. And then the last but not the least, we have what you call the gap junction. This is one of the major uh, cellular junction that most students don't forget, the gap junction. Okay, also known as the nexus. So this comprises of a protein known as connexin. Okay, a protein known as connexin, and it doesn't have any transmembrane protein. Okay, so this the gap junction, their major function is that they allow direct transfer of small molecules and ions from one cell to another. Okay, remember we said that one of the functions of cell junctions is to provide channels for ionic and metabolic coupling. So gap junction, one of the major functions is that it is the one which provides channels for ionic and metabolic coupling and transfer of small molecules from one cell to another. Okay, we are good. All right, so this slide is just showing you what we are talking about. So this is microvilli. Then you have the tight junction. Then from tight junction you have the adherence junction. Then you have the desmosome. Then you have the gap junction. Then you have the hemidesmosome, like that. Okay. Now let's talk about glandular epithelial tissue. Since we were talking about covering epithelial tissue, now let's shift our attention to glandular epithelial tissue. Let's talk about glandular epithelial tissue. Okay. So when it comes to glandular epithelial tissue, there are some general considerations that we may take uh, into into importance. Okay. So glandular epithelial tissues normally develop from or within a lining or a covering epithelium, just like I mentioned earlier. Okay. Then, when we're talking about the secretory cells of glandular epithelial tissue may, number one, may differentiate by remaining in the lining epithelium or invaginate into the underlying connective tissue and remain attached to the lining epithelium. Okay. Then, or they may invaginate into the underlying connective tissue but lose their connection to the epithelium. Okay, so the glandular epithelial cells, the glandular epithelial tissues can be classified based on the method by which their secretory product is distributed. Okay, so we have what we call exocrine glands. So these exocrine glands basically, their secretory products are released onto an external or internal epithelial surface, either directly or via a duct or duct system. Okay. Then we also have endocrine glands. So under endocrine glands, we don't have ducts, okay? We do not have ducts. And the secretory products of endocrine glands are known as hormones. Are we good? Are we good up to this far? All right. So let's talk about the methods of product release by these glandular epithelial tissue. The method of product release by these glandular epithelial tissue. So when it comes to the methods of release by these glandular epithelial tissue, we have what we call the merocrine gland. Okay, we have what we can classify as merocrine gland. Okay, this one here, the merocrine, um, the merocrine gland. Okay, so we have merocrine gland, we have holocrine gland, we also have apocrine glands. Okay, so when it comes to the merocrine glands, basically, um, when it involves exocytosis. Okay, merocrine involves exocytosis. For example, you have the sweat glands and the pancreatic acini cells. Then when it comes to apocrine, okay, when it comes to apocrine, the apocrine usually, um, secretion involves loss of the membrane enclosed epicocytoplasm, okay, usually containing one or more lipid droplets. Okay, so the apocrine type of secretory mechanism is normally found in mammary gland and the sweat glands of the axilla and rectal region. Then we have holocrine secretion. So holocrine secretion has to do with the secretion is produced by the disintegration of the secretory cells themselves as they complete their terminal differentiation. Okay, so this kind of secretion, which is holocrine, is found in sebaceous glands. Okay, sebaceous glands, sebaceous glands. That is why we find such. Okay, then the merocrine. Okay, the merocrine secretion can further be categorized as serous, okay, mucus, or sera mucus. Okay, so now um, we have, let's talk about the types of secretory products. When we are talking about the exocrine glands, we have mucus, okay, we have serous, and some which are special include lipid, sweat, cerumen. Okay. Then when it comes to the endocrine glands, we have the protein and steroid. These are the types of secretory products. Okay. So the serous, an example has to do with the pancreas and the parotid. And on the mucus, we have the goblet cells. On the seromucus, as far as the seromucus are concerned, prominent structures include the demilunes. Okay, so classification of exocrine glands. These exocrine glands can either be unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular or multicellular. Okay. Hopefully we are okay on that one. So now let's talk about the classification and the types of multicellular glands. Okay, we have those we call simple glands. Okay, we have those that we call simple glands. Okay, so glands basically can either be simple, which means that their ducts are not branched, or glands can be compound, meaning that their ducts have two or more branches. Okay, so let's start by talking about simple glands. So simple glands, basically we have simple tubular. Okay, simple tubular, you have branched tubular, you have coiled tubular, you have acini or alveoli, okay, which is a sac-like structure. You have branched acini. Okay, so when you're talking about simple tubular, these examples include the mucus glands of the colon, intestinal glands, or the crypts of Lieberkühn. Then on the branched tubular, examples include glands in the uterus and the stomach. Then on the coiled, we have the sweat glands. On the acini, you have small mucus glands along the urethra. Then branched acini, you have examples such as the sebaceous glands of the skin. And then coming to the compound glands, okay, coming to the compound glands, we have the tubular. Okay, tubular here. An example has to do with the submucosal mucus glands, or Brunner's glands in the duodenum. Then you have the acini or alveoli. As far as the compound gland is concerned, an example has to do with the exocrine glands, exocrine pancreas. Then you have the tubulo acini. Okay, tubular and acini combined. For example, the salivary glands. Okay, so these are some of the special features of some exocrine glands, of which I already talked about the semidemilunes. Okay, so the semidemilune basically consists of a cup of serous cells around the end of a mucus tubule. Okay, where they appear like a half moon shaped in section. Then we also have myoepithelial cells. So these myoepithelial cells, myo from the word muscle, these just resemble smooth muscle cells in their fine structure, but are of epithelial origin. Okay, and these are very much prominent in sweat and mammary glands, as they surround secretory units lying inside the basement membrane, and they aid in the expulsion of secretory products from the gland. Then we have endocrine glands. Okay, endocrine glands, basically they have no ducts and are generally not polarized. Okay, so occurrence unicellular, okay, such as the enteroendocrine cells of the digestive tract. So these cells do not show polarity, okay, because they are just located within an epithelium and they secrete away from the free surface of the epithelium. And we have small clusters of cells, e.g., the isolates of Langerhans in the pancreas. Okay. So basically, the endocrine glands are not that much hard. We'll talk about the endocrine in detail as a topic on its own. Thank you very much. Have a blessed evening.